Hi, guys.
Oh, it's just JC. I'm setting it up for Clint.
Hey,
Pretty
JC,
good.
how's
He'll
it?
probably be on in a minute. I'm just trying to.
Thanks for yesterday. I don't know why I couldn't find it.
Can you just check to see if it allows you to share your screen?
I wasn't going to share my screen.
Oh, you're fine then. Okay. I didn't know if Clint needed it. So it's set up now.
I don't even know how long I'm talking. I don't know much about this. We're just going to chat and I'm going to talk about.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I just recorded this stuff for him. Okay, that should be all set up for him. Okay, that should be all set up for Clint. I'll see you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Hey, hey.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You're looking very sharp.
Thank you. You know, my family kind of teases me when I do Zoom. I like to wear some color. So like people will like,
Hey.
yeah. So there you go. You're in my same wheelhouse. I did a little impromptu presentation with your mom yesterday.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, for office meeting?
Yeah, it was so funny. She called me for a question at like 9:30. She's like, "Do you want to come on my 10 o'clock?" And I was like, "Okay." So it was good.
Okay, I'm gonna grab an area light. I'll be right back.
Okay, and yeah, I want to ask you a question when you're done before we start.
Well, I guess so much for that idea. So I could check my car. So what's your question?
What are we talking about today? How long
You
do I
said
have?
you had a question for me.
What?
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about what may or may not happen to exchanges and about exchanges, or just about that.
So that was.
What do you want?
So
Hi, Brian.
same
Brian.
last
Hi,
time.
good morning.
And you know Byron?
I've met Julie a couple times.
Hi.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to first talk about, the first 10 minutes of the show, is just basically talking about mortgage rates, what they're doing. And then we're kind of separating that. I'm going to kind of reintroduce everybody and then go a little bit more into discussion specifically about 1031. So if there's any questions, of course, we'll both chime in at that time and kind of to understand and clarify the process. A lot about what we talked about last time, but first, we'll just start with the general definition, what that means, without getting into too many details. Then talk about, the general campfire rumors with the potential for it to just completely evaporate or be taxed on a, per transaction basis, and just any information that you have, which is probably, all just rumor at this point, and what you're seeing in the industry, and then mostly just kind of talking story. So it should be pretty quick.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to make sure I have my head on straight.
Let's see. So Byron, do you have any like rates and things of that nature before we get in that you wanted to talk about?
What do we want? Do you want to just start with in the beginning, like just what rates are? Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah,
like
so
ballpark?
I'm gonna introduce the show, kind of talk to everybody generally, and then I'll start asking questions, and then we'll go
Okay.
from there. What you're
Okay.
seeing in the mortgage rate, talking about your new transfer, why you like Axia compared, I won't mention your old position.
Yeah.
And just the tools that you now have available, what you're able to do for people, so that you can, hit it fast and talk about why, after so many years at your previous position, why you made, a very serious jump to a new one, like the benefits of being in that new position.
Okay.
Yes, Julie.
Byron, can you get investor loans for VA now?
No, you can't do VA doesn't do investor that I'm
Okay.
aware of. I've never
But
heard of it.
FHA is doing investor rate loans, but not VA.
VA, yeah, I haven't heard of one yet.
Okay, thanks.
Other thing, Julie, we talked probably about a year ago, 6 months ago, and I said you say people call you every once in a while, they heard you on the radio. You're like, oh, I wanted to talk about this new thing. And I think I don't remember what that was. Do you happen to remember?
DST,
Yeah,
maybe?
What is it?
DST, Delaware Statutory Trust.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we did discuss that a little bit. And that's, I think, going to be really interesting how that comes into play over the, depending on how the tax situation goes. Might be better just
I
to
have a
leave
lot
it
more
like
people
that.
doing them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe one of your shows, you should bring on one and talk about it, just so people understand.
Well, we should definitely talk about it in general, a place to hold your money. Of course, if you put it in a Delaware statutory, say it again?
Delaware Statutory Trust. Yeah, I have to say it slow too. But we probably shouldn't get into too much depth with that, but yeah, we can mention it if you want.
What?
Statutory Trust.
That's something new?
It's being more
No.
utilized, but it's been around for a while.
Oh,
So it's just basically a holding company in assets. So you can put your money into it. They tie it up with, storage buildings or office buildings, medical buildings, whatever. And then they give you a very moderate 5% return.
okay.
Hold it there for a while before you decide to alter your money. Have you had the big question I have with that is, have you had people trade out of the Delaware Statutory Trust?
Yes. Not many, but when the trust decides to sell the asset, the client has to sell its percentage interest. So they either can get into another DST, which a lot of people end up doing because they like the hands-off approach, or they get back into real estate. But if they outright sell, then they're going to pay taxes just like they didn't do an exchange.
How's the cap rates on it?
I think pretty good.
5%, right?
Yeah, about 5%. I mean, here, what is it, 2? So
have you seen anything better than that, basically? Because we always like to get like a 6 or 7% if we can.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing, but people have to plan on probably having it as a long-term hold, 5 years at least. They can try to sell it if there's an emergency, but then like Inland would have to try to sell it for them. I mean, it's not as liquid. You shouldn't look at it as a liquid asset. You can sell anytime. You should look at it as your
non-liquid asset. Right?
Non-liquid asset. Sorry. So yeah, I have a lot more people doing it.
All right. Well, let me introduce everybody here.
You should change your name
because
it says you're Victoria. You should change your name in your little box because your
she's
name,
pretty
you don't look like a
cool.
Victoria.
That's my daughter.
I mean, I guess you could be.
Mike and Kia. Hopefully that some videos will turn out. I had a listing photographs yesterday of a $5.5 million property, so I'm excited about it. All right, let's go. Aloha and good morning. This is Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate. We're broadcasting today at 11:10 a.m. 98.7 FM and 96.7 FM on the KAOI radio group. Thank you and good morning to everybody for joining us. Today I have special guest Julie Bratton of Old Republican Title. So we're going to talk about 1031 exchange. And I also have Byron Yap of Axia Home Loans. We are now actually partnering on this radio show, and we will be discussing a myriad of topics, and he's really helping me through this process of scheduling and getting guests. So thank you so much, Byron, for partnering with me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hey, so you made the move to Axia after how many years at your last position? Why make the change to a new horse when you were doing so successful?
Well, one of the things that I had been with my previous employer or previous mortgage company 10 years, and Axia had approached me because we were expanding at least the amount of customers we were dealing with. And with the previous company I'd worked for, they weren't able to provide the support, the technology that I desired.
Mm-hmm.
So I made the move. I was actually going to be before COVID, but I held off in the initial stages. And then found the time, end of December, I decided for 2021 to make the change, start 2021, December 2020, make 2021 a new change. It's been a good change. Axia has a lot of tools that I'm able to utilize now to help me further expand the business, service the customers, and which is important to me, technology driven. So it makes my life easier instead of working 7 days a week. So
And
me and
easier
my
for the client,
assistant
too.
moved over. It's been a great change. With Axia, one of the important things, I have more access to lenders, different lenders, different programs that I didn't have before. Perfect example is I'm dealing with a 4.3 oceanfront property that normally if I used my old lender, I couldn't do it. I was able to find, we have an array of different jumbo lenders now that I'm able to figure out which one is going to be useful for the customer that I do have. And it's been a lot of learning going on right now, but it's a great, exciting move for me.
What have you seen in the mortgage industry right now? What are rates at?
Rates are right around, they've been trickling up slowly. They're in the low threes, maybe 3.25, 3 1/8. We're seeing that change happening with the rates steadily bumping up, maybe weekly or bouncing back and forth. There is no sure way if it's going to go up or go down. I think the market's kind of a little confused in some ways.
Yeah, so a lot of that can be triggered from purchasing of securities and bonds and things of that nature. And there has been a lot of purchases, but the interest rate hasn't gone up too quick from my understanding comparatively to what we're seeing out in the market. So there's been a lot of indications that interest rates are due and past due to increase with all the extra liquidity that's out there. So that being said, it's really an ideal time to get a loan. If you're looking to make a purchase, unless you're cash, there's very little opportunity left to get such a low interest rate from my understanding.
Yes, and one of the things in the market that I'm seeing affecting a lot of customers, at least in some ways in purchasing, is the appraisals. It seems the market is rising faster than the appraisers are being able to adjust their appraisals. So we're seeing some lower than normal appraisals on purchases.
Yep. I've seen that. I actually have a few contracts that are out there, obviously with the lack of inventory, many times we're going multiple offer situations. And when those multiple offer situations come across, it's always better to go with cash simply because you don't have to deal with the headache of
Yes.
scheduling an appraiser to get in there, and B, hey, what if it doesn't appraise? We like to put a little chunk of, information in the contract that basically, has a clause that if it doesn't appraise, that the buyer has to come up with additional cash. There can be parameters associated with that, like say it misses, by, 100,000, then that doesn't apply anymore. But, like you said, they're not able to use the process of escrow. They can't go in and find out what those are. They don't count as comps until it closes. So it is the appraisers have a very tough job ahead of them in order to figure out where the market is. And they really can only tell you where the market was. So that's one of the reasons we like to use that. I can call all day, know that what I've priced it at and what I got an acceptance at is market value or slightly above or below, but the appraiser can't use that information. They can only use what's sold, and it's a really tough thing. And of course they're inundated right now. We're close to 740 transactions pending across the island right now, and typically we're only at about 550 on average. So it's been a huge spike in the amount of traffic. We've actually seen it drop too. We were close to 850 transactions that were going across the island, but with the lack of inventory, there's still the same number of buyers, there's still the same kind of fervor that's out there, but there's just less properties available. So the total number of transactions is starting to shrink, at least for the pending ones. So tell me some about, the difference between investors and homeowners, like the difference in programs and interest rates and amount down.
Well, usually, a homeowner, because it's going to be their primary residence, they have an option of, programs that allow for lower down payments. And of course, being a homeowner, your rate, because of the risk versus an investor, your rate generally is lower. For an investor, banks, institutions are going to want to see more skin in the game, and the rate is usually higher because the risk is, the risk is not living in there, if something changes in their lives, that it's more apt to go into foreclosure versus a personal residence where you're living inside of it. And you're going to take more, more effort. Not that the investor is going to do less effort, but there's going to be more effort to make the payment being an owner occupant. So that risk is put in there when you price a loan, or loans are priced for investors versus owner occupants.
Yeah, everybody's going to take care of their home first, and
Yes,
they want to make sure that they're taken care of and have a place to live. So that's why there's less risk associated with it. Now, what was the difference again? Like on an interest rate, is it like a quarter point difference, or is it pretty similar?
the difference between an investor and a homeowner could be up to, just depending on, of course, there's many variables in their credit, those kind of things, the property type itself, but it could run half a point to a point more for an investor versus an owner occupant. It just really depends. There's many variables you have to add in there.
So one last question I have, many times, people like having a low interest rate, especially when it's somewhere they're going to live for the whole 30-year portion of the mortgage. So, they'll come in with additional cash to buy down points. Can you explain how that works a little bit?
So what happens in the mortgage industry, we call 0 points, meaning that's par, we call it. Let's just say for argument's sakes, it's 3 1/4. A homeowner may decide, hey, if I'm going to live there, if this is my permanent residence, they may pay an upfront fee to buy the lower rate for the lifetime of the loan. So an example might be, if the going rate is 3 1/4 at no points, and a point may get you a rate of 2.875, the homeowner may say, hey, it may make sense, the savings I'm going to get for putting this upfront money based on the loan amount, it may make sense to buy down the rates. So we're seeing it really depends on the customer and what their desires or their anticipation of how long they're going to live there. Of course, a lot of it's speculation, but most homeowners, usually if you're going to buy down the rate, you want to make sure that that upfront money that you did pay for the points would pay for itself in savings within the first 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, and so that's a good point to underline, is the fact that if you buy down points, there's that cost compared to the savings. And as long as you're going to do it equal to that savings or greater, then you should definitely do it.
Yes.
So having that extra capital available is more and more important over the life of the loan, because you can save excess return on that dollar over time. And, when rates has been as low as they have been, I actually refinanced my own home and, paid down points. And it was actually, I think a pretty significant savings. And, it made it so my monthly cash flow could be significantly less. So it was really worth it to me since I had the cash available at the time. But yeah, you were right. It's about a 5 to 7 years. I think we were right about more towards a 7-year payback for it. But, having that extra comfort of not coming up with that additional cash every month made a ton of sense. So I was really happy to go ahead and, pay the extra points down. And again, it's really more for, either assets you're going to hold for a long period of time, a personal residence that you're going to live in for a long period of time. And that being said, how are you? How's the business been since you've been transferring to the new position? I know in general, the real estate market's been crazy, but how are you been?
It's been busy. I had to wait till to really start the loan business. I moved over here January 1st, but I really couldn't do any advertising or marketing till actually May, because we had to wait for the state to sign off on the license.
Yeah, the DCCA has been a little slow.
Yeah, so it was more word of mouth. So we were happy with what we were getting, word of mouth, but now we're able to advertise. So we're doing a full push coming up in June with a lot of digital and print and different things like that to get the name out there and the word out there. But we've been busy.
I bet it's been tough for the DCCA themselves, because they're no longer in the office, their central location where they can just talk across the desk, work out a communication. They actually have to do a lot of phone calls, and it's not as efficient. They actually are doing quite well, but when the registration office is all the way at the office in your home, it can be more difficult. So hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you talking to me about what specific rates are, and more importantly, helping me with the show. Today, and I want a ton of help with understanding the 1031 exchange process. And today, as mentioned previously, we have Julie Bratton with Old Republic Title and Home Loans. This is the KAOI radio group, 1110 AM, 98.7 FM, 96.7 FM. And I'm Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, the Hansen Ohana. You can find me at mauirealestate.net. Longtime family, been here for several decades. I've had my license for 20 years, but my family's, my mom's had her license for over 40. My dad's, 38 years now. So we like to work with the professionals in the industry, and that's why I have Byron Yap on here with Axia Home Loans, as well as Julie Bratton with Old Republic Title. She specifically does 1031 exchange. Can you tell us a little bit about what 1031 exchange is and how the process works?
Sure, thanks for having me. A 1031 exchange is a way to defer paying capital gains tax, and it's just for investors. So that investors need to sell investment property and buy investment property within a specific period of time in order to defer paying the capital gains tax.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things with that, and it's a very useful tool, because if you're making a rate of return on an investment property, let's just say, hey, you have $1 million, you're making 7% on that. And, it's a zero basis for some reason, meaning you haven't paid tax on any of it ever. That just makes it simple. Most people have a basis of let's just say $500,000, but in this case, let's say not. If they were to sell that property, they would have to pay the capital gains on that full $1 million. That being said, if they were
capital gains and depreciation recapture and 3.8 affordable care tax, so federal and state tax, so it can really add up.
And what do you think that is, about 40%, 35%?
Without the depreciation and the 3.8, we're probably looking at about 25 to 30% for most individuals. But then you tack on the depreciation recapture. That's almost like a silent killer. Yeah, like I've had people sell their investment property and they, in their minds, they have no gain. Let's say, okay, I bought it for 500,000. I'm selling it for 500,000. And I ask, well, how long have you owned it? 17 years. They'll have gain attributable to just depreciation recapture. So it's,
yeah, they get their pound of flesh somehow. But when you're doing that 1031 exchange, and your basis is $1 million, let's say your rate of return right now is 5% on an investment, and which is in the medium range. Most people like to get about 7%, on an annual basis for a rate of return for investment property. It's not really typical here on Maui to get a 7% return, but lots of commercial buildings in the mainland storage centers might have those kinds of rate of returns possible. So let's say they take that $1 million, then they have to pay tax on it, and then put it into another investment. Then their basis, their rate of return is only going to be off of that smaller amount, let's say 70%, so 700,000. Now, even if you're able to get a 9% return, that's still 300,000 that's not working for you. So the idea, is to do this 1031 exchange, keep that $1 million intact and whole. And then when you're getting that return off of it, you're getting that return off of, whether it's 5% or 6% off that $1 million, because you're changing the asset from one type of property to another. And that's why the 1031 is such an important part of the real estate vehicle. Now, one of the big questions people have is, with the new administration here, are we going to be able to maintain that? What have you heard on the rumor mill if we're going to no longer have that 1031 exchange tool available?
So that's the big question these days. We are really not necessarily concerned with it. It's not even in a bill format, so it's a lot of chatter. I'm not saying that things can't change and be modified, but as of now, that there's no bill to even opine on. And if there was a bill, it would have to pass, go to the Senate, then pass after that. So that we just don't see the movement going forward. And without that's what our FDA goes to. So there's a lot of chatter and mass hysteria going on about it, but we are not concerned. I mean, if there was something really,
concrete
us,
and
you would be
discussion.
able to make more of an opinion. But of course, if you have the opportunity to say, don't, get away with 1031 exchanges, do it. The more people, the better. But again, we're not putting anything out to cause any mass hysteria at this point. We're not necessarily concerned about it moving forward. And also, which is kind of interesting, I mean, this is my 20th year doing exchanges, and every new administration that comes in always puts 1031 exchange on the block. They always try to modify it. They always try to do something because obviously it can be an incredible revenue source for them. But it would be devastating to the economy. And as soon as that just starts, drilling it, whittling it down, is it good? Is it bad? They end up doing nothing because it would collapse the economy in so many ways. Commercial real estate, residential real estate, it just would.
Well, they don't realize that they get that money to them with the power of the increased investment. When you're getting rates of return, you pay taxes on that money. It's not like you can shelter that cash anyway, especially if you're going to go into some sort of triple net property. They take those taxes out automatically the same way that income is in most cases. Right. So the function of that is to really preserve the asset and the money generating power. Those don't normally make big capital gains, depending, unless it's like individually owned. If there's a basis increase or a rate increase of your rent, then yes, the value of the asset can increase, but most time it's about the same. And maintaining that asset value when you go into another investment really actually helps the economy as a whole, because if all of a sudden all the transactions started to having to pay 20-30% on their basis, then that's going to be a lowered steady income to the government as well. They're actually reaping the reward of this investment that goes out there. That money that's in the world, that additional capital, means that when those checks get passed out to the asset holder, that they're actually getting a higher tax rate on a regular, consistent basis. So it's really in the government's best interest to maintain the 1031 exchange. Now, I've always seen, go ahead.
All right, from what I can really just say, if you guys have the opportunity or anybody has the opportunity to oppose this going forward, and again, there's nothing out there to actually oppose yet, but if you have the opportunity to do it, of course, do it. But right now, we do not see a concern. And, the 1031 exchange is really a great tool. I mean, it's not just to defer paying capital gains tax. I mean, like you're just discussing. I mean, that's the number one reason. That's top of mind for everybody because nobody wants to pay. But you do have the opportunity to diversify and leverage your real estate portfolio. I mean, you can sell one property and buy 5. You can sell 3 properties and buy 1 if you wanted to. You can use this as an estate planning tool. Get into better income producing property. I mean, for example, let's say you have a client who owns vacant land and they own it. It's worth $1 million and they've owned it for 20 years. You know what? It sounds really glamorous to have, vacant land, property on the Big Island or property in Maui. But you know what? Vacant land doesn't pay. Sell it, do an exchange, and get into some income producing property or a better income producing property to pay for your aging parents' health care or your kids' tuition at a school. There's just so many great reasons to do an exchange, not just deferring paying the capital gains tax.
Well, tell me a little bit about, go ahead, Byron.
Do you, Julie, like if someone was owning in the mainland, say in California, do you handle that if they're trying to buy in Hawaii?
Yes.
I know a lot about you, but what can you, like, if I own a house in California and I live in California and I want to buy an investment in Hawaii, what service or do I approach you? How does that work?
Yep, you just approach me, call me or send me an email, say I'm ready to do an exchange and I'm selling my property in California and buying in Hawaii. So that's a good point. You can do an exchange anywhere in the United States, the US Virgin Islands, and Guam, just not Puerto Rico. I don't know why, but anywhere in the United States. So usually all the properties aren't located in Hawaii. There's always something on the mainland somewhere. Yeah. So you could be selling in Hawaii and buying in Wyoming.
Now,
it doesn't matter.
Do I have to, if I want to buy, let's just say I have a commercial building I'm selling, do I have to buy a commercial building? What are the things I possibly could? What can I look at?
Okay, so when you do an exchange, there's a term called like kind. You have to buy and sell and buy like kind property. And like kind property in an exchange is very broad. It's any combination of real property, but sometimes the consumer reads it as like kind has to be exactly what you described. Commercial building for commercial building, industrial building for industrial building, condo for condo, single family for single family. Although all of those examples are fine, it's really any combination of real property. So for example, I had a lady selling a commercial building in California, and she bought as her replacement property another commercial building and 4 condos to get her exchange whole. Okay, so it's any combination of real property. But that's another point. When the clients are doing an exchange, they need to be buying property or properties that are equal to or greater than what they sell their relinquished property for. So for example, that lady in California, she was selling a $6.8 million commercial building. She needs to buy $6.8 million of replacement properties or property to have 100% deferral. I mean, she can always buy a little bit, lower, but the difference would be exposed to taxes. And at that juncture, it would be a partial exchange. But for 100% deferral, she needs to buy $6.8 million worth of property. So she diversified. She actually did some estate planning. She bought that $2.2 million commercial building. And I asked her, how many kids do you have? She's like 5. And I said, well, then why don't you buy the commercial building, buy 5 condos or single family homes, rent them out. And then when you pass away, your kids inherit these properties at a step up in basis and you're done. She's like, she had no idea she could buy more than one. She had no idea she could mix it, commercial and residential. So that's a really good point that you bring up. So as long as it's real property, you can do an exchange with it. So like you can't go out and buy a boat. That's personal property, just to give you an example.
No
Here's the one
boat?
that I get
Are
once
you
in a while.
sure?
Mobile homes. Mobile homes qualify if they're affixed to the ground. But if you can drive off with them, they're not.
Okay.
One of
That
the
makes
other
sense.
questions I did have, because I hear it for years being thrown around these terms, 45 days, 180 days. Can you explain what those days mean? Because, some people get confused on them.
Yes, and those days, those timeframes are the black and white of exchanges. Okay, so when a client closes on the sale of their relinquished property, their clock starts ticking. They have 45 days from the day they close to identify in writing what they think they're going to buy, and 180 days to close on it. So the 45 days is included in the 180. They don't get 45 and then a fresh 180. So to say it differently, the entire exchange period is 180 days. But in the first 45 of those 180, they have to tell us in writing what they think they're going to buy. And that's very stressful right now in this market. 45 days just whizzes right by. So I always tell people, start shopping early. Like if you're just about to list this property, start shopping. Take this listing period and escrow period to weed through the properties you like and don't like. So when you're in your 45 days, you've either really narrowed it down or maybe even have an accepted contract. But those time frames are black and white. There's no extensions. So
How many properties can you identify?
there's a couple of ways to identify. The most common is the 3 property rule, where you can identify up to 3 properties, not 4, 3. And a lot of people only intend to buy 1, but they put backups down just for peace of mind because they're not sure what they're going to get. Okay, so 1, 2, or 3 properties. If they want to identify more than 3, like the California lady, $6.8 million lady who's bought 5 properties.
Oh, 6. Yeah.
She has to go under the 200% rule. So the fair market value of that entire list combined of properties, the 4 or more, cannot exceed double of what you sell your relinquished property for. So if you sell your relinquished property for $1 million and you want to identify 4 properties or more, that entire list combined cannot exceed 1 penny over $2 million.
That makes a ton
It's like
of sense.
you can't go and go hog wild and identify all of Kihei and then pick one later. Somebody probably did that, and that's why we have this silly rule.
When you say identify, does that mean put it in a piece of paper and give it to you? What does that mean?
Yes. So we provide the clients with an identification notice. Well, 2, they can use one or the other, and they complete it and fill it out. So when they identify, they need to put complete addresses, street number, street name, street, avenue, boulevard, specific unit number, city and state. So it needs to be specific.
one of the important aspects of this whole 1031 process is when to contact Julie. And I always tell people well before we sell the property, but there's so many times that people wait for the last minute. And the most important thing is never touch your cash. You can't put your fingers on it even for a second. You need to make sure that the escrow agent from the property you're selling is in contact with Julie, so that they can transfer that money to her escrow account. Can you explain a little bit of how that works and the types of transactions
Right.
you've seen?
So the escrow, as soon as you open escrow on the sale of your relinquished property, that's when I really need to know about it. But like Clint said, the earlier I talk to you, the better, just in case you have issues or you have a story I need to know, or, iron some stuff out. But once you have an accepted offer is ideal for me to know. I get a copy of the contract, the title report, I draft the exchange documents, I give them to escrow. Escrow will get everything signed in one packet, and then it closes. And the day it closes, escrow is required to disperse money. If they disperse money to the client, they're toast, no exchange. The money has to go to the exchange company. So my best advice to people who aren't sure or on the fence, just remember, no property can close without an exchange being set up. This happens to me on like Monday morning phone calls. They start at 5 a.m. Hi, I closed on my property on Friday. I learned about an exchange over the weekend. I didn't touch the money. It's still sitting at the front desk at escrow. Is it too late to do an exchange? And the answer is yes, because they have to enter in and sign the exchange agreement on or before closing. I mean, it can be the day before closing. We don't require language in the deed. It just needs to be signed by the exchangers and the appropriate people. So,
But that makes your job really hard. The more lead time you have, the better.
Yes, especially in this market, you guys, especially in this market, it's incredibly swift and people are making last minute decisions and we can only work so fast. So, the rushes that are coming in are really crazy. But,
So what I mean-
I
oh, sorry.
really think if the agent, like Clint, you're doing your job properly and you always do, like bring this up as early as possible. So this is not a surprise at the last minute. And it gives the client an opportunity to speak with me or their tax advisor, and you guys take them shopping. I mean, again, like let's say they're selling in Maui and they want to buy in Wyoming, place them in a state that they want to be in and let them shop around a little bit. It just gives them a little bit more peace of mind the earlier in the game they learn about an exchange.
Yeah.
Because, when it's the last minute, they say, my agent didn't tell, that would never happen with Clint. So it's just.
And some other
earlier the
things that I
better.
noticed that agents don't really do is educate their, buyers and sellers about some of the idiosyncrasies of purchasing in Hawaii or in the United States for that matter. My
Right.
wife is Canadian, so I'm very familiar with a lot of the differences and processes for international buyers, both Japanese, German, French, Chinese, you name it. I've dealt and understand a lot of these little idiosyncrasies. But one of the things that most people don't understand is something called Haarp Deferpta. So those are two separate things, but they act the same. They're just different rates. Haarpta is the Hawaii, and what they do is they withhold. It is not a tax. Yes, it's a percentage, and they're holding your money. And then Haarpta is the Hawaii version of it. So if you're living in the mainland and you're selling a property here, it's 7.5%. And then if it's FERPTA, the federal, that means it only applies to people outside the United States. They withhold 15%. So that's a total of 22.5%. It's a lot of money. But you got to remember, this is not a tax. They're holding it to make sure you pay your taxes. And tell us a little bit about that and how to go through that process in a 1031.
All right, so let's talk about HARPTA first. HARPTA, like you said, it's a withholding. It's not a I'm going to take your money forever. It's just a withholding, but I got to tell you, it looks really ugly on a closing statement. So people kind of
yes.
forget about it. So if you do an exchange, you're exempt from the HARPTA withholding. Okay, but HARPTA withholding is for non-resident sellers selling property in Hawaii. If you don't live in Hawaii and you sell property in Hawaii, escrow is obligated to collect 7.25 and pay it to the state.
Quarter, not a half. You're correct. Sorry about that.
Quarter, that's okay, quarter, and pay it to the state. And then once you figure out what your true gain is, you can file for a refund for what you're entitled to, because at the end of the day, you're only going to pay taxes on your gain. You're not penalized for owning property in Hawaii. It just looks that way on your settlement statement. Now, if you do an exchange, at the end of the day, you pay taxes just like you were any other person. If you do an exchange though, escrow will not collect it. You will be exempt from the withholding. So escrow at closing would send us, the qualified intermediary, all of the funds. And then if you decide, let's say you don't find property and you decide I'm going to cancel my exchange, I'm not going to go through with it, then I have to collect the Haarpta. So you don't get away with it just saying, I'm going to tell escrow, and then let's give it to Julie. So no, it doesn't, like, it's going to get withheld if you don't do.
And how's that apply to FERPTA? I mean, do you have to
So
come with?
FERPTA is different. FERPTA is a little bit different. Haarpta, you can get the exemption really quickly, like 10 days or so. So that's why escrow will not collect it. Escrow will send us the money and let us handle it if it falls through. FERPTA, however, is another story. FERPTA is for foreign sellers selling property in Hawaii. So let's say you have a Canadian seller, it's subject to FERPTA. Escrow is required to collect 15% of the sales price and pay it to the state, or pay it to the feds, sorry. And the problem, I'll tell you the problem with that, and then I'll tell you the solution. The problem with that is if a client wants to do an exchange because he wants to be exempt, because you'll be eventually exempt, but you have to wait 120 to 180 days for that exemption to come in. That's a long time. So that's why escrow is just going to collect it. So the problem is if escrow collects 15% of the sales price, the exchange company doesn't get all the money. How are we going to complete the purchase of the replacement property? They're short a chunk of money. So our foreign person has to either bring in fresh cash or get a higher mortgage to complete his purchase. And then when the exemption comes in and the client gets his money back, he's getting back exchange proceeds. And remember what Clint said, you can't touch exchange proceeds. So the refund that you get is taxable. You know, you just didn't exchange, so this wouldn't happen. So the way around it is we recommend, or if they can't do it, it's okay. This is just the way around it. Bring in fresh cash to escrow to cover that withholding when you sell that relinquished property. Then escrow can pay the withholding with that fresh cash. We, the exchange company, get all of the exchange proceeds, buy the replacement property, we're done. Then when the exemption comes in and the client gets his money back, he's getting back his own cash, not taxable.
Now, what if it's something along the lines of a bridge loan or, you know, maybe hard money loan just temporarily at a higher interest rate? I'm sure. What do you mean?
At what point? You mean when they're bringing the satisfied?
When they're bringing the money over so that they can make up the gap of the, you know.
I don't care where it comes from. Escrow deals with that.
Cool.
But yeah, to me, it'll look like fresh cash. As long as the withholding is satisfied, escrow satisfies that. That's okay. So, you know, sometimes clients half the transaction might be subject to Haarpta, or half the transaction might be subject to FERPTA. Let's say, you know, my sister and I are selling a property on Maui. I'm a resident of Hawaii. I'm not subject to Haarpta, but she might. So 50% of the transaction might be subject to Haarpta if she does not do an exchange. Or foreign sellers, maybe you have an American husband and a foreign wife, or vice versa. Maybe half of the transaction would be subject to FERPTA. So it's really important to uncover that early so the clients understand it, because I have to tell you, there's nothing like them finding that out a few days before closing when they see their estimated statement and they're like, oh my gosh, what are these capital letters? What do I do? So it's really important that it comes up as early as possible. So if your clients know that they don't live in Hawaii or there's a foreign component to it, they should let you know immediately.
It's good to know. Now, with the volume of transactions increasing, I'm assuming that you're seeing a lot more exchanges. How has that affected your timeline on things?
That's a really good question. You know, I've been doing this for 20 years and I really honestly thought my busiest time ever was March 2005. Nope. We are way ahead of that. It is crazy. Like, for me to say we're so busy, like, it is nuts. So we really have to prioritize closing dates. We can't not necessarily, I mean, we can get documents out in 20 minutes if we really had to, but it's really been difficult. The volume is crazy. So the amount of notice, you know, a little notice would be nice. Put it that way. So that's why I say, well, as soon as you open up escrow, that's the greatest time to tell us. We have time to get the title report. We have time to review it. We have time to get the documents to escrow. Escrow has time to send them out for signatures. But when we're dealing with, we're closing in 2 days, it's hard. So
Wow, I couldn't imagine having to deal
I
with
mean,
that.
we're
and make-
doing over 100 transactions a month these last few months. Like it's an incredible amount of work.
I've seen and I've talked to some other escrow officers just dealing with the general title process, not 1031. And normally they're dealing with, 30, 40 transactions, and they're doing anywhere from 90 to 130 transactions. And, they have their assistants and things, they're doing additional hiring, but, having.
And it's hard to find it, and it's hard to find help.
Oh,
It's hard to find help.
Yeah.
It's like you're a hamster on a wheel a little bit, like going and the emails, they keep coming and coming, and it's interesting.
All essential and important. Everything is of the utmost importance. And if something doesn't get handled right, it's their booty or yours.
Yeah, but I feel like if we manage the expectations of the clients, and they've been very understanding and they have been, honestly. I mean, you get a few crazies once in a while, but for the most part, everybody has been very understanding and patient, and they understand that it's just an incredible amount of volume.
Early education goes a really, really long way in order to help.
It really, really does.
So
And
that's why-
setting up how you want to communicate with people, or what the best way of communication is also very helpful. Like
What is
sometimes
the normal?
sorry.
Sorry. What is the normal communication like? If I'm in escrow, is escrow communicating with you and I need to communicate with you, or are you communicating directly with escrow? What are my expectations?
That's a good question. So when people call, I mean, I only need one person to call me, and then I can go run with it. Like Clint, if you say you have a new client who wants to do an exchange and you give me an email introduction, I'll start talking to the client, get what I need, and then I have to start communicating with escrow. And then I'm going back and forth with escrow. I need a copy of the contract, the title report. And then maybe the contract doesn't match the title report. We need to clean that up. Then the agents have to get it. So there's an enormous amount of orchestration that goes into an exchange. And then when they're buying the replacement property, we have to deal with, we're talking with the lenders now, Byron. So now we have to make sure the lenders understand how much we're holding, what they can use, how much they can use for their down payment. It's a lot. So I feel like we're in the middle of everything. Like we see the sale, we see the purchase, we're dealing with agents, different escrow officers, maybe in a different state, maybe attorneys, because it's in New York, they don't have escrow there. So it's very colorful from where I sit.
A delicate ballet of different members between loan
Right.
officers, escrow agents that are selling the real estate, helping the buyer out. All those communications come together. And, it's one of the things is me as an agent, whether I'm doing buying or selling, when I set up these communications, especially now with the volume being just off the charts, we have to make sure that we make the introduction, that the proper information gets across, and touch base on timeline on a regular basis, as well as inevitably explain a lot of the finer points. So, having somebody that is educated and knows the process and been through it hundreds of times, like, my family and I, is really important to a smooth transaction, because it just is shocking to me how many times a buyer or seller has not been educated by their party. And when something comes up like, I don't know what Haarp Deferpta is, how could you not know? When you bought the property, you should have been educated then, and now you're going to sell, you're in escrow and you don't know about the fact that this thing exists, is a bit shocking to me that, people can get that far along in the game without some of the basic information being there. So working with professionals that's been in the industry for decades, like Byron Yap with the Axia Home Loans, like Julie Bratton with Old Republican Title. Old Republican Title. Thank you. So I know them personally. To me, it's not what office somebody is in, it's their experience, their diligence, and their hard work that matters to me. And I'm very selective, not just about the offices I use, but more importantly, the people that I'm using. That's why, when Byron made the change to Axia, I've been using him since that process. And I love their loan programs that they have available. But more importantly, I love Byron. He gets it done. He communicates, he's quick, and he knows the process on the individual complex basis, because it all depends on so many little scenarios and facts. And those details are essential to making things smooth. So that's why I like somebody who knows Maui and somebody who understands processes here in Hawaii, like Julie, like Byron. So make sure that you're working with educated individuals that are professional above all else. And if you don't, expect delays and little catastrophic problems that happen. The first thing that I always explain to people when they're looking to get a loan, as I say, don't use a mainland lender under any circumstance. Now, homes are different than condos and investment properties. If it's homes, you'll hit a few speed bumps along the way, inevitably, because our processes are different. But if you're going to get a condominium or an investment property in Hawaii, the problems are absolutely halting, catastrophic, no matter how hard I work to explain the process, how our Bureau of Conveyances work, how the timeline works. Inevitably, something doesn't get communicated to an underwriter, some process gets overlooked, and it's a disaster. So it's quite a juggle to work with, and make sure you're working with a professional.
Can I add to that? I tell clients sometimes that it is really important that the team that you work with, because like Clint, you're in the business of selling real estate. You're a professional in that. You know everything about that. But you're in the business of loaning money. You know all of the intricacies of that. I'm the 1031 girl. I know all of that. And we all have things that we do in our everyday business that seems like a no-brainer, but when there's an exchange going on, we really need to talk to each other, because one weird thing that maybe Clint wants to negotiate, or one weird thing that you need to do in your loan, could not jeopardize the exchange, but have some type of taxable event, just like that. So it's really important that we all talk to each other. Because,
Yes.
the first thing the client's going to say, I hired you, professional realtor. I hired you, professional 1031 girl. I hired you, professional Byron. How could you let this happen? And we're all doing everything we normally do in our everyday business that is not normally odd. But when there's an exchange involved, we really got to, communicate. So it's really,
And
that
there's
is
some
really important fact. So thanks for bringing that up.
Other facets that people don't really realize, that when you have to do a like-kind purchase, that doesn't mean contract commercial to commercial or condo to condo. That also often has to do with the loan ratios as well. So can you explain a little bit about that, Julie?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So let's say your client sells something for $500,000. And escrow pays off commissions, escrow fees, and a mortgage, and the net proceeds is going to be 300. So escrow closes and they send me the 300. The 300 that I'm holding is going to be the down payment for the new property. And the client has to either come up with cash or get a mortgage for the difference. He has to replace the mortgage that he had on the relinquished property. He can do it two ways. But most people think they have to get a mortgage. So they can replace it with a mortgage, great, call Byron, or they can replace it with cash. As long as they buy something equal to or greater than 500, they've done and used all of the exchange proceeds, the 300 that I'm holding as their down payment, they're good. So that's you're right. They have to replace the mortgage that they had on the relinquished property, and it has to be equal to or greater, depend. But as long as they buy high enough and they use all the cash, they're done. Like, let's say our guy wants to add $100,000 to the cash. I'm holding 300. He wants to add 100 more. So his loan is a little bit lower. That's fine too. As long as at the end of the day, he used all his money and he bought high enough, he's good. So the lenders really need to, I know Byron, you're super good about this, confirm what we're holding.
Yeah.
So lenders, and what happens oftentimes is a lender will say, hey, we're using all of your, why don't you, let's say he needs a loan for 500,000. And the lender says, well, why don't you get a loan for 550? Because then because you qualify for 550, and then you can take the extra cash and, you can improve the place, do some landscaping, put in a mailbox, woohoo. And then the exchanger says, well, I don't think Julie will care, because I'm using all of my exchange proceeds to buy the replacement property. What's Julie going to care if I get $50,000 more? I'll tell you why I care, because escrow at closing can only ask me for what they need. So if the client gets a mortgage that's too high by 50,000, they're going to be taxed on the 50. So the financial puzzle has to fit. If he wants to do improvements, he can get an equity line after the exchange and do his improvements separately. But Byron and I need to be on the same page. The financial puzzle needs to fit. So if you have a good lender, they're doing that for you. They're confirming that this puzzle fits. They're not just saying, I'm in the business of loaning money, I can loan you more, let's do it. That's when a problem comes up.
If I'm in escrow, say with an XYZ company, I can still use you if you're in a different company for the exchange, right? I don't have to.
Right, I work with all the escrow companies. It doesn't matter
Okay.
where the escrow is. So
And
yeah.
that's why, you know, to
And I have
me,
a great
it's the
relationship
officer-
with everybody. Sorry?
That's why the officer is important to me. It's not just the agency, it's the officer and their capability and knowledge. You've been doing this for 20 years. You've seen all sorts of crazy stuff. So
And
one of the
before that, I
things,
sold real estate, so I'm really
oh
glad that I
no,
have that
no,
background.
don't do it. It's crazy out here. But
Now-
one of the
I'm not going to, but
important
I used to. I wouldn't do it anymore, but I used to. So that really helps my, bigger
Understand the
picture of
process and
understanding of
the
what
hurdles that we have to
everybody
go through.
needs, and more importantly, why they need it. So that's been a good
Now,
plus.
I missed one question I was gonna ask is, the days, is it calendar days or business days when you say 45, 180 days?
Calendar, every day
Calendar.
counts. So if your 45 days lands on a Sunday, I still need your ID notice by Sunday. If the 180 days lands on Christmas, you got to close on the 179th day or the 180th day, which brings me a point. At the Hawaii contracts, the closing date contingency reads closing is on this date. But if it lands on a holiday or a weekend, you can close on the following business day, not on an exchange.
Okay,
So you might have a contract, right, that you have a mainland component to it and is banking on that language, but the exchanger needs to know he has to close earlier. So that's something like Clint knows.
Absolutely.
Like, you have to be sensitive about these dates. They're set in stone.
And here's one of the nice tools that people don't realize. It actually astonishes me. I'll deal with business professionals that have been doing, major investment real estate for, decades now. And right now, one of the hardest components is available inventory. So it's so hard to find something out there to replace, and people will panic because they're going to have to pay huge amount of tax. They don't realize that there's an additional vehicle called a Delaware statutory trust. Tell us more.
Well, I was going to mention something else, but I can't.
Oh,
mention
go ahead.
DST.
That we'll go with you. Something
What I was
else.
going to say was, and then I'll get to the DST really quick. People are really stressed out about this 45 days. And I think because they're looking for the most perfect property. And I kind of say to them, I'm not sure if your mindset is this, but this isn't just an investment property. You're not going to marry the property. You're not stuck with it forever. Like, of course, don't ever buy a piece of junk, but if you have to make a lateral move just to defer paying that chunk of tax, do it. Hold on to it for a year or so. And if you still don't like it, you could always sell it again and get into something else. Okay, it's an investment property. You shouldn't be so emotional. And then I had a lady last week say, well, I am more emotional because I'm gonna retire and I'm gonna move into it. And I said, okay, well, when is that gonna happen? And she said, I don't know, 5 or 7 years. And I was like, oh, what can happen in 5 or 7 years? So I kind of had to readjust her thinking a little bit. Like, she has time to experiment. If she finds perfect, great. If she doesn't, she has time to make another step into something she really wants without all of this current stress that we have in this environment.
Yeah.
So, there's I just like to have that conversation with people to make sure they're really thinking it through. Because some people say, I'm just going to pay taxes. I'm like, really? You don't have to, just bring it down a notch. But yes, the Delaware Statutory Trust is also called a DST. And that is it seems to be a really good backup for people. And the money, you put it into a portfolio, and this company manages, so you don't have, toilets, trash, tenants, you don't have to deal with any of that. This company takes care of it. And they might have a portfolio of 5 or 6 healthcare facilities, or student housing, or an Amazon building, or a Walgreens. Okay. And your money will sit there and you will get probably a 5% return. It really just depends on all of it. And all you do is collect a check every month, and you don't have to do any of this stuff.
No headaches.
And it's been people are really starting to look at it a little bit more seriously, but it's not, you have to look at it as not a liquid asset. You're going to have to hold on to it for 5 years or so. Think about it that way. But you still get the benefits of deferring paying the capital gains tax. You may get a better rate of return depending on where you're at in your real estate portfolio. And when you pass, you still get the benefits of a step up in basis, or your kids do when you pass. So it's been a really interesting vehicle that all of a sudden people are really paying attention to because of the lack of inventory right now.
Yeah,
There's no DST properties in Hawaii. They're on the mainland, but
Mhm.
we have people here that do them. So it's not like you can go drive by and smell it, taste it, and feel it or anything.
But it's important to see what DST that you're purchasing. Oftentimes they're storage facility complexes, their offices, their medical buildings, as you've mentioned, and having it in a secure asset is wonderful. You know, the lack of liquidity is probably one of the major hurdles to overcome, because when you want to take that capital and do something else with it, you have to find somebody that's like equivalently going to replace that money, from my understanding, right?
Right. So that company will try to throw it out there to the other investors and see if somebody will pick it up.
And does it
But,
have to be
you know,
one of
we
the
don't want-
members of that
I don't
DST?
think they
or
really want to look at that. Sorry.
Does it have to be one of the members of the DST, or can it be somebody outside? Like, I mean, does it have to be a member buying you back out of that DST, or can it be somebody in an outside entity replacing you in the DST?
That's a good question. I don't know. We'll have to ask the DST guy on that. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
well,
That's not my
that'll be for
Kuleana,
another show
but,
then.
they just want somebody to replace it. Like there was a one I think about a month ago. It was an Amazon building. It went in like less than a week. Like everybody went into it.
Yeah,
And I think that Amazon building signed a 15-year lease, and they're not going anywhere. So those people are going to have their money tied up for a really long time, but they're going to get a great, rate of return and not do anything.
and they're
I'm not there.
probably going to continue using that building well beyond 15 years. You know,
Yeah,
One of the
probably. But
things-
then when the DST decides to sell the asset, let's say 5 years from now, then you are going to have to do another exchange. Either buy another DST or get back into real estate if you want. Doesn't matter, but you'd still have to move forward.
Escrow has what we call, of course, they have like title insurance. And
Right.
do you have some kind of insurance? Let's just say the IRS challenges my exchange.
We have all of, first of all, we're not going to ever make sure that we're going to always make sure that your
Yeah.
exchange is up. We're going to have all the documentation, all of that stuff. But if you're doing something funky behind the scenes, we would never know about that. So you should have your tax advisor be on board with what you're doing.
Okay.
So, but you're going to have your exchange agreements, your closing statements, everything is I's dotted, T's crossed from an exchange perspective. Otherwise, we wouldn't have funded it.
Nice.
We're really proud of this. We have never had an exchange fail for something that we have done.
Wow.
all right, that's what I like to hear.
And we're
Great.
really proud of that
That's
statement.
great.
I don't know. I don't think any other companies can say that. And you know what? I've been with my company for 20 years and I'm really proud of it. I love that. I
Yeah.
love them. We're a great team. We have a great team of attorneys. My assistants are fabulous. I mean, we have really great people. And that's why I don't even think about,
Well, you're a
going
huge
somewhere
authority
or
on the
doing something
subject.
else.
You travel to multiple islands in order to teach people about how the
Yeah.
process goes. You lead
It's fun.
classes. She's at office meetings like we had yesterday. So I appreciate you coming to the office meeting.
Thank you.
And, it's important that you work with professionals. So I want to wrap up the show here because we're coming to the end of our time. I'm Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, the Hansen Ohana. You can find us at mauirealestate.net, or always don't hesitate to call me on my cell phone. Text is best at 808-280-2764, or email me at clinthansen33@gmail.com. My name is spelled CLINTHANSEN33@gmail.com. And there's Julie Bratton with Old Republican Title. She's the 1031 specialist.
Old Republic Exchange.
Oh, Old Republican Exchange. Thank you. And
That's okay.
Byron Yap of Axia Home Loans, or actually, it is Axia Home Loans.
Yes.
So can you give your guys your contact, please?
Julie, you can go first.
Sure. Text is not best for me. So email is probably best for me. It's J for Julie Bratton, my last name. So JBRATTON at oldrepublicexchange.com. You can also call my cellular if you like, 808-265-5854. So email anytime you want, ask question. I mean, you can call or you can text if you want to, but I think I'm quicker and better on the email or the phone call.
Right on. Yeah, it's easier to
There you
organize.
have it.
And Byron.
My email is Byron, BYRON .yap, YAP at axiahomeloans.com. I'm better on the phone. My number is 808-280-3491. Thanks, Glenn.
Hey, thank you guys. Aloha,
Thanks,
and I
Julie.
really appreciate all your time today. Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Looking forward to working with all of you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay,
So
bye.
that's the end of the show. And so what we're talking about now won't be on the show. But thank you guys so much. That's awesome.
you.
It went real smooth. We hit our times perfect. The first 10-minute segment was right on the button. And then we transitioned into the, approximately 45 minutes afterwards. And so the 45-minute is the section that we're going to be shifting around and reusing. And then Byron and I are going to be, making those weekly 10-minute, talking about, the important specific dynamic changes to interest rates and those factors that come into play.
Okay.
Great.
If you're ever looking for a 10-minute something, I can always pick a topic like 1031s and vacation homes.
Okay.
Or 1031s and related parties. I can do a 10-minute or
A quick
7-minute
filler,
about it.
Yeah.
Because that affects a lot of people or partnerships. I can do a 5 or 10 minute blurb about it, just so people are aware that those are potential hazards and issues in an exchange. Because I have clients who are wanting to sell to or buy from related parties. And yeah, it's just stuff like that. And vacation homes, obviously, you're in the vacation soup over there. So why not?
So I can't sell to my wife. The parties, how that you can't arm's length transactions, all that kind of stuff. Not
People
really.
don't understand that's a thing.
Yeah.
And then very caught off guard about it. But yeah, I think we did really good.
Yeah,
maybe
it was
next
good.
time, I don't know if there's room for us to do it where our names are. Maybe we should put our emails in there where our names are. So they can are they seeing us? Or they're just hearing us?
So there's most of the people who are going to see this are going to just be through my Facebook, and then I will upload it to YouTube. But the majority of the listeners will be on those radio stations, the 1110 AM, 98.7 FM, and 96.7 FM on the KAOI radio group. So that's Monday mornings at 7 AM. And it's been a really valuable tool. The biggest issue I've had was actually coming up with people to interview and build content, which is why I partnered with Byron, because he's on top of it, knows his stuff, and is really personable and can get a lot of, co-hosts and shows on there. So he's my co-host now.
This radio thing is interesting because the last time I did it with you, Clint, people in the community do listen to it because I've had people come up to me and say, hey, I heard you on this, you guys talking about this. So I think it's going to be good for not only Julie, everybody, but people do listen to the radio on Maui at least.
Mm-hmm.
They do. I've had that experience too the last time, Clint. I still have people asking me about it. And when did we do this? 2 years ago? It feels like.
Yeah, well, I only have 19 radio shows, so this will make it 20. And what I do is I recycle the shows. So your show has probably played at least, 6 or 7 times.
Top hit.
People listen to it because I do get calls and emails from it.
Oh, good.
Great. Awesome.
We did it a while ago, so it's good.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right,
you.
you guys.
Okay.
Well, I look forward to doing it again. But yeah, if you need a little more 10-minute content here and there, I can always plug in your spot.
Yeah.
Cool.
We'll always have shorter guests and things of that, so it'll be good to have you a filler. And I'm sure it's always nice to just be a part of the discussion on things that are going on,
Yeah, it's so busy, you guys. It's just crazy.
Crazy.
I'm kind of glad you asked that question about we have to really now prioritize when are you closing?
Yeah.
Because it's just the only way to keep it up. And then you have the clients calling you and emailing you, a couple times a day with another just random question. And, I realize they've never done this before, but, I'm like a mile a minute. And they're like, okay, well, what about this? And I'm like, oh my God. But
that's why these radio shows are so great. A lot of times people have a question and I'll just be like, here's the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, have a great day. Let's do it again soon.
We'll talk,
Bye, guys.
Clint. We'll talk. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye. Congratulations.
Bye, Julie.
Bye.